You're watching Study with Sudhir. My name is Sudhir. This is your digital classroom. We are looking at the last explanation video of the Bassanio Casket scene, which is Act 3, Scene 2. We've already seen that Bassanio has chosen the right casket. There has been this exchange of loving words between Portia and Bassanio. And in the last part of Act 3, Scene 2 is what we will see the preparation, in a sense, for the court scene, because there is a letter which has arrived from Antonio to Bassanio. So in this part of Act 3 Scene 2, we will see Bassanio reading that letter, what are the contents of that letter, and how does Portia react to the contents of that letter. And this, in a sense, sets the tone for what will happen, what will unfold in Act 4 Scene 1, which is the most critical trial scene, very important from the examination point of view. In fact, all the three casket scenes and the court scene, that is Act 4 Scene 1, are very important from the examination point of view. Also, the Act 1, the three scenes which are there in Act 1, because they are the initial scenes. A lot of students keep asking me which are the important scenes in MoV. So let me say it once and for all, because I've said it in comments on numerous occasions. All the three scenes of Act 1, because they are the three introduction scenes: Antonio, Portia, Shylock. Then there is a Morocco introduction scene, which is Act 2 Scene 1, which is important. Then the three casket scenes of Morocco, Aragon and Bassanio, in that order. Then there is a scene, Act 3 Scene 1, which is the scene between Shylock and Tubal, and Act 3 Scene 3, which is the scene between the confrontation scene between Antonio and Shylock, which are important. And of course the trial scene, ring scene also to an extent, but of course for the 2021 class 10 batch, that's not part of your syllabus. So you can rejoice to that brief extent. But if you do these 9 to 10 scenes that I have listed out, you should be pretty good as far as the exam is concerned. If you are looking to attempt only one MoV, but even if you want to attempt two MoV, I'm sure at least 2 questions out of these 9 to 10 scenes that I've listed will definitely come. Okay, now let's get to the business part. The letter has come from Antonio, and Gratiano reacts saying, "Nerissa, cheer on stranger, bid her welcome." That is basically welcome Jessica, who has also come along the party which has now come to Belmont. "Your hand, Salario, what is the news from Venice? How doth that royal merchant, good Antonio? I know he will be glad of our success. We are the Jasons. We have won the fleece." Now this particular line is important. This can come as an examination. It's also advisable to actually use this as a quote in your answers, because that's how they kind of describe Bassanio choosing the right casket. That's how Gratiano kind of describes it. So in that sense, this is an important phrase which has been used by Gratiano. So he is basically saying that Antonio will be very glad to hear about Bassanio's success, which is why the reference to the fleece. We are the Jasons, we have won the fleece. And what is the backstory for this, which is also not a very complicated story, so you would do well to remember it. Basically, Jason was a Greek hero. See, also there is a difference between the biblical references and the Greek mythological references. You would do well to remember the Greek mythological references much more than the biblical references, because the former have a better chance of coming as a reference to context and you being asked to explain, or you be expected to explain. So Jason was a Greek hero who had actually obtained the golden fleece when he went along with his companions. Now Bassanio is basically, if we saw Act 1 Scene 1, the opening scene when he is in conversation with Antonio. Now Bassanio had compared Portia to the golden fleece. So that reference now being repeated by Gratiano, though the interesting part is that at that time Gratiano was not part of that particular scene, but he must have, given the fact that Gratiano, Antonio, Bassanio, Salario, they're all good friends, it must have been kind of communicated thereafter to Gratiano, which is why the reference once again to the fleece. Also, we are the Jasons. Now there is a bit of a debate whether Gratiano was referring only to Bassanio out here, or whether he was referring to himself and Bassanio, given the fact that he has also been promised, or he has also expressed his desire to marry Nerissa at almost the same time when Bassanio is marrying Portia, right? So he could be talking about we in reference to both himself as well as Bassanio. But obviously the main victory in that sense, the main triumph is that of Bassanio, because he is the one who chose the right casket in order to win Portia's hand, right? Salario says, I would you had won the fleece that he hath lost. Now, Salario obviously is not really reacting to Graciano's moment of triumph, because he is aware of Antonio's real condition at that point in time, because he says that he wishes that they had won the golden fleece, that is the wealth that Antonio has lost on the high seas, and that's what will unfold later on in this particular scene. Portia, there are some shrewd contents in yon same paper that steals the color from Bassanio's cheek. So she is very perceptive. She has immediately noticed the fact that Bassanio's facial expression has kind of changed as soon as he read the letter which has been sent by Antonio. Could turn so much the constitution, some dear friend dead, else nothing in the world could turn so much the constitution of any constant man. What worse and worse, with leave Bassanio, I am half yourself, and I must freely have the half of anything that this paper, same paper, brings you. Now you see the reference to death, that some dear friend must have died for you to kind of react with this kind of a sad, tragic facial expression. So that whole, it is almost bringing a sense of foreboding that something very untoward, something very tragic could actually occur as far as Antonio is concerned in the scene that will follow in the court. So in a sense, it's preparing the audience and the reader for the fact that this play, The Merchant of Venice, could actually take a tragic turn in the scenes which will follow. So she's basically saying that there must be something very, very tragic news, some very bitter news in that particular letter that Bassanio has read, because of which he's looking so pale, the color has completely drained out of his face. And she also says that he must have lost someone who is very, very dear to him, right? He's very, very dear to him, and that's why his complete body language and facial expression has changed so much. So she says to Bassanio that to tell Portia the cause of the sorrow that he is undergoing at this point in time, that he is experiencing at that point in time, because now, after the fact that he has chosen the right casket, she and Bassanio are one, right? They are about to get married, so she and Bassanio are one. So she ought to know whatever is kind of troubling him, and the same goes for her as well. So she wants to know what is it that is written in that particular letter. And that's when Bassanio says, this piece of dialogue important. In fact, there are quite a few pieces of dialogue in this particular part of the scene which are important. Oh sweet Portia, here are a few of the unpleasantest words that ever blotted paper, right? So almost like, talking about the words and having a heft of its own, having a weight of its own, that these are the most unpleasant words that ever blotted paper. This is again a key phrase you can use in your answers. Gentle lady, when I did first impart my love to you, I freely told you all the wealth I had ran in my veins. I was a gentleman, and then I told you true, and yet, dear lady, rating myself at nothing, you shall see how much I was a braggart. Braggart is someone who kind of talks a lot about himself, praises himself no end, basically exaggerating, boasting about himself and his position. When I told you my state was nothing, I should then have told you that I was worse than nothing, for indeed I have engaged myself to a dear friend, engaged my friend to his mere enemy to feed my means. Here is a letter, lady, the paper as the body of my friend, and every word in it a gaping wound issuing lifeblood. But is it true, Salario, hath all his ventures failed? What not one hit from Tripolis, from Mexico and England, from Lisbon, Barbary and India, and not one vessel escaped the dreadful touch of merchant marring rocks. Merchant marring rocks, essentially referring to the rocks which we had also seen a reference in Act 1 Scene 1, to basically rocks that would essentially completely destroy, demolish merchant ships, right? And as a result of which the fortunes of merchants would take a downturn, would nosedive. Now in this particular piece of dialogue, Bassanio is telling Portia that the letter contains some very, very unwelcome news, right? Something which is obviously not going to make anyone, including Bassanio, happy. So he says that when he first expressed his love and affection for Portia, he had told her that the only wealth that he actually possessed was that of his good birth. Okay, and he says that I actually spoke the truth. But ever since he claimed that and told her that he actually owned no other possessions in the world except for his good birth, he was actually overstating his position, because he actually needed to tell her about the debt that had been incurred. He now tells Portia that he's actually indebted to a very dear friend of mine, that is Antonio, and this friend Antonio has actually taken a loan for the sake of Bassanio from his worst enemy, referring to Shylock, a man who has nothing but hatred for him. The reference to mere enemy, right? And he says that he has taken this loan, 3000 ducats, only to kind of help Bassanio woo Portia, right? And then he turns to Salario and asks Salario whether the news is indeed true that all the merchant ships, and now we are given the different destinations that Antonio's merchant ships had been headed to, from Tripolis, from Mexico to England to India to Lisbon and Barbary. So you would do well to remember these kind of locations, because you could use that even if a reference to context question comes from Act 1, Scene 1, when this also was discussed in quite a bit of detail. And he says that whether not a single vessel, not a single merchant ship has actually escaped being wrecked on the high seas as a result of those dangerous rocks. And basically, Bassanio, in this particular piece of dialogue, here is the letter, lady, the paper as the body of my friend, and every word on it a gaping wound issuing life blood. Now this is a very strong piece of dialogue, again something which you can use as quotes in your answer when you are talking about the relationship between Bassanio and Antonio, about how Bassanio reacts to Antonio. Okay, the relationship between Antonio and Bassanio is an important element, important component of the Merchant of Venice, and you would do well to kind of prepare your points, write corresponding quotes, so that you don't have to think during the examination on what you need to write. Okay, this should be a well prepared answer in the form of say 8 to 10 points with about half a dozen quotes all ready. Go to the examination, just kind of put it out. So basically, after reading it, Bassanio is looking upon Antonio's letter as if it was his body, right? And the cruel words that are there, because Antonio has expressed his grief and his position in very strong language. So the cruel words are like stabs on a man's body, and that is taking out the blood of his body. Again, a pointer to what could possibly happen in the trial scene, right? So I have given you two references which are in a way a pointer to what could happen in the court scene. As I said, this is the playwright Shakespeare's way of preparing both the reader and the audience to what? And he's creating a sense of anticipation, right? He's obviously creating that sense of suspense that this is possibly what could happen in the trial scene, and this also creates a sense of sympathy for Antonio, because he's obviously the protagonist. He is the Merchant of Venice. So in that sense, this writer, the playwright, is also creating a sense of audience support, reader support for his protagonist. Okay. Now, Salario, he replies saying that not a single one of those merchant ships has actually survived. Besides, it should appear that if he had the present money to discharge the Jew, that is, to return the money to Shylock, Shylock would still not take it. And that's the reference to the fact that Shylock is more focused, more keen on kind of killing Antonio by taking a pound of his flesh and letting him bleed than actually wanting his 3000 ducats. So his intentions, according to Salario, are this, right? Not to take his money. Never did I know a creature that did bear the shape of a man, so keen and greedy to confound a man. Please underline these words, this phrase, this particular phrase. Again, something which you can use in a character analysis of Shylock, or if a question comes as to how did Antonio and his friends look at Shylock, you can use these kind of phrases. Your marks will go like this. Okay, so never did I know a creature that did bear the shape of a man. That he's basically saying that he's like an animal. He's like an animal, a beast, and we have seen references of Shylock being referred to as a cur, a dog, by Antonio and his friends. So he says, and he's so keen and greedy to confound as in completely destroy, demolish Antonio a man. So basically Salario says that all his ships have perished and he will not take the money, and he says that he has never seen any human creature who is so eager and hungry to kind of destroy and ruin someone else. And he says that he plies the Duke at morning and at night. So basically now we are coming to know that Shylock is constantly kind of appealing to the Duke to give him justice, to impart justice to Shylock for the fact that the money which he had lent has not yet been returned, and doth impeach the freedom of the state if they deny him justice. 20 merchants, the Duke himself and the magnificos of greatest port have all persuaded with him, but none can drive him from the envious plea of forfeiture of justice and his bond. Now the freedom of the state is essentially referring to the law, the position of the law, the integrity of the law in the city of Venice. Impeach essentially is talking about questioning the integrity of the state. He is telling him that is this the integrity of the law of Venice, that it cannot provide justice to a foreigner like Shylock who is actually undertaking trade in that particular city. So he is also threatening to take legal action against the governors of the city of Venice and calls in question the equality of rights of foreigners who are actually contributing to the trade of Venice. And Venice, as we have already seen, the Rialto is an important trading city where the foreigners like Shylock also play a very important role. At this point in time, Salario is saying that Antonio's friends, the Duke himself and many important nobles also of Venice have also tried to persuade Shylock to not to kind of push this case beyond a point with Antonio, but Shylock has been very stubborn in his position that he will do what has been promised to him, and he will take the full penalty of as a result of the forfeiture of the bond, and that will be justice according to Shylock, of forfeiture of justice and his bond, right? Another phrase, envious plea, envious plea, that no one can kind of take him away from that very revengeful claim that Shylock is making in this particular regard. Now Jessica, the daughter of Shylock, speaks, who's now with Lorenzo. When I was with him, that is when I was with Shylock, I've heard him swear to Tubal and to Chus, that is fellow Jews, Tubal we have already seen, his countrymen, that he would rather have Antonio's flesh than 20 times the value of the sum that he did owe him. So though he owed him 3,000 ducats, even if Antonio were to return him 20 times that amount, he would still not have it, and he would much rather prefer to have that pound of flesh, right? And I know, my lord, if law, authority and power deny not, it will go very hard with poor Antonio. And if the law of the land and the power does not kind of come in between, does not intervene, Antonio is going to suffer very badly. So you see, Jessica also, even though they're all talking in very harsh terms about Shylock, she's on the side of her newly wedded husband, Lorenzo, and the others who are all opposed to Shylock, right? Now, the word impeach, as I already said, that it's referring to question, that we've already said, and Jessica is now expressing the opinion that Antonio is really in grave danger unless the authority of the state, that is the city of Venice, actually invokes its law in order to protect Antonio. Now, Portia, is it your dear friend that is thus in trouble? So Portia is kind of listening and trying to gauge what is really happening, because obviously she's completely oblivious. She's completely in the dark about this entire case. She did not even know that this kind of money had been borrowed by Antonio for the sake of Bassanio. Bassanio, the dearest friend to me, the kindest man, the best condition and unwearied spirit in doing courtesies, and one in whom the ancient Roman honor more appears than any that draws breath in Italy. Draws breath in Italy means lives in Italy. Now this is another piece of dialogue that gives you a sense of the relationship, the friendship between Bassanio and Antonio. So you would do well again to quote from this as well. So basically Bassanio tells Portia that Antonio is his closest friend, who he loves more than anyone else, and he is the kind who will never tire of doing anything, of showing kindness to any other fellow human being, and his nature is really the best. It is the sweetest in doing courtesies, and in one in whom the ancient Roman honor, that is loyalty both to the country as well as to his friends, is really the best. and that's what is displayed by Antonio. He says that he's the most tireless man in actually doing these kind of acts of generosity. Remember, he would actually lend money gratis without actually charging interest on it, and that was the reason why he and Shylock were always at loggerheads. In that sense, Bassanio describes Antonio as a representing basically good old Roman ideal of honor, right? The ancient Roman honor, right? So you could actually use these kind of quotes when he's talking about Antonio. Portia wants to know what sum he owes the Jew. He says 3,000 ducats, and then Portia says that pay him 6,000. What, no more, only 3,000? Obviously shows her position as a wealthy lady. Pay him 6,000 and deface the bond. Deface as in do away with the bond. Double 6,000 and then triple that. You know, you give him more and more money, however more money that he actually needs, before a friend of this description that you just described, because she's obviously impressed by the manner in which Bassanio has described Antonio, shall lose a hair through Bassanio's fault, that he, even a hair of Antonio, should be harmed as a result of her husband, of the person who she is going to marry, should not come to any kind of harm. First go with me to church and call me wife, and then away to Venice with your friend, for never shall you lie by Portia's side with an unquiet soul. Unquiet, essentially a mind which is disturbed, a mind which is distracted, basically to say that even though he's physically, Bassanio is physically with Portia, his mind is focused on the troubles that Antonio is going through. So she says, I don't want a distracted soul, so you call me wife, go to the church, but then you go to Venice and let you try to save your dear friend. You shall have gold to pay the petty debt 20 times over. When it is paid, bring your true friend along, that is Antonio. My maid Nerissa and myself meantime will live as maids and widows, that we will behave as though we are not married, maids as in single women, spinsters, right? Come away, for you shall hence upon your wedding day bid your friends welcome, show a merry cheer, since you are dear bought, I will love you dear, but let me hear the letter of your friend. So it basically says that since you are dear bought, that is, since your friend has paid very dearly for your sake, right? So she says that I will love you even more, but let me first hear what has actually been written in the letter, right? So that's what she says to Bassanio. Now Bassanio reads the letter. Sweet Bassanio, my ships have all miscarried. Miscarried as in they have all been wrecked on the high seas. My creditors grow cruel. My estate is very low. Estate as in his condition at that point in time. Financial condition is very low. My bond to the Jew is forfeit, and since in paying it, it is impossible I should live. All debts are cleared between you and I. If I might but see you at my death, notwithstanding, use your pleasure. If your love do not persuade you to come, let not my letter. So if your love, that is Portia, does not allow you to come, let not my letter should not kind of be over that. Let Portia have the final word. My letter should not persuade you to come. If Portia does not allow you to come, you don't need to pay any attention to this letter. So he's saying that all my debts are cancelled. That is, the debt that you owed me is now cancelled. You don't really owe me anything. So basically, while Portia feels responsible for the fact that Bassanio owes this amount of money to Antonio, and Antonio is going through this entire tragic situation because of her future husband, Antonio on the other hand says that that particular bond is now cancelled, you don't need to bother, and he is showing a very positive and a good natured self, saying that if your future wife says that you should not leave her, you please to ignore the contents of this particular letter, and Bassanio should do as he wishes. Portia, oh love, dispatch all business and be gone. She says, he who finish all the business and you go at once to Venice. Bassanio says, since I have your good leave to go away, I will make haste, but till I come again, no bed shall ever be guilty of my stay, nor rest be interposer betwixt us twain. So basically, twixt us means between us, between the two, and basically says that I shall not kind of go and sleep on any bed and not even take rest, as it will keep me separated from you, which basically means to say that I will not rest till this entire issue is settled, right? Interposer means something which comes between two people. So he says that since she is willing, since she has given the go ahead, he will go, but till then he will neither sleep nor take any rest till he returns to Portia, and then they will all leave to get married, exeunt. So basically this particular scene conveys a lot about Portia, the Bassanio Casket scene, the way she reacted. So you need to listen to the explanation video number 1, 2, 3, 4 to get a comprehensive idea about this very important scene, the Bassanio Casket scene, because it's not just about him choosing the right casket, but what unfolds thereafter, which is very, very important. It also shows you a lot about Bassanio, his presence of mind in choosing the right casket, and thereafter the manner in which he reacts to Bassanio's letter. That again is very, very important. Okay, so a lot of important pieces of dialogue from this. So while you are preparing for your examination, Act 3 Scene 2 remains one of the most important scenes that you must prepare very well. It's not very difficult if you get a hang of it, and I do hope that the explanation videos that we have put out here on Study with Sudhir will help you do precisely that. Thank you very much for watching.